Welcome back to another Free Friday Tidbit. Oh, almost halfway into November already. This is insane how fast time has been marching on. So this month in November 2023, we are focusing our Free Friday Tidbits on sensory issues, whether it's sensory processing disorder or just sensory systems in general, or sensory motor integration. Those with FASD or other neurobehavioral conditions can have a lot of issues around the sensory system. Why is this? Because if you recall, alcoholism is a neurotoxin, but it affects everything that is under construction, so to speak, at the time of exposure. So there are points in time where our nervous system is really honing in on those areas that have to do with understanding what various stimuli means, right? So if you look at our sensory systems, we have 5 that give us information about the outside environment, right? We have our sight, our hearing, our touch, our taste, and our smell, right? All those 5 senses give us information about the outside environment. We also have 3 internal sensory systems. One is vestibular, which gives us that sense of where we are in space, right? We also have interoception, which is how we know what's going on inside of our bodies, whether it's hunger or thirst or temperature, that kind of thing. And then there's also proprioception, which is how we know what our bodies are doing. So the information coming through that sensory system has to do with our large motor muscles, right? It's how you know that you're moving your arm without watching it, right? Or it's how you know, it's how you're able to do things like rolling over or getting up or just keeping your balance, right? All those things have to do with proprioception. For instance, if you have a kid who breaks every single crayon in the crayon box, they have a proprioception issue. They have no idea how hard they're pressing, right? So today I really wanted to talk about issues of being either overly sensitive or undersensitive when it comes to touch and texture, right? Because these really are big things, right? So if we're oversensitive to touch, then some of the issues that you might have would be not being able to stand the tags in the back of your shirt or the back of your undies or the seam on the toe of your socks, right? And there's a lot of very simple things we can do to accommodate for those. We can buy tagless when it comes to undershirts and underpants, things like that. We can cut out the tags. We can wear our socks inside out, and that way that extra thick bit is on the outside and rubbing against the shoe instead of against our toes. So there's a number of things like that we can do. We can be very aware of the fiber content, right? We might be so sensitive that we can't handle certain textures, like when it comes to fiber content. You know, for instance, the polyester that was so popular in the 1970s is very different from the synthetic fabrics of today, which are very, very silky. Some people cannot stand wool. It makes them very itchy. Other people really seek out certain textures, right? So people who are undersensitive need a touch or texture-rich environment, right? Other people, if they're oversensitive, they might need something that feels a little more cold and sterile, very hard, smooth surfaces. So again, it's just creating the environment that most meet your needs. And you can have both, right? And then I mentioned a few minutes ago, temperature. That's another thing. That's part of the interoception, right? Being able to be aware that you're hot or be aware that you're cold. If you're living in the southern half of the United States, but you're not someone that is aware of being hot, then that puts you at particular risk for heat stroke, right? It's very dangerous. So you have to put accommodations in place to protect yourself, right? Conversely, if you're undersensitive, then perhaps you don't feel cold. And this might be found in the kids that are constantly forgetting their jackets places, right? They walk outside, it doesn't feel cold, so they don't get that environmental trigger to go back in and get a jacket, right? So if your mom in the house, you can say, hey, don't forget your jacket, and you send them out the door. But who's going to remind them when it's time to come home? And how good is the school at getting things into the lost and found? So I worked with one woman, bless her heart, her kid went through like 5 jackets in 1 year. Gets really expensive. So another story that I can share with the undersensitivity would be to pain, right? A dear friend of mine who went through the facets model training with me and who's also now certified, her child who's on the spectrum, went with her to collect the eggs one morning because they had a chicken coop, and she started to twist her ankle in a divot in the floor. And if you're like me, and I think most people, if you feel that your ankle is about to twist, you'll throw yourself down in order to protect your ankle, right? So this little girl did that, but in so doing, the way she landed broke her arm, like clean break, like through the skin break. And she didn't scream or holler or cry out. She just said, Mom, I broke my arm. And my friend's like, oh, yeah, right. Because there were no tears and franticness. And she walked into that room and sure enough, the arm was extremely broken. So it was that lack of feeling is very disconcerting. And I myself broke my arm back in high school, way up in the socket, and I didn't experience the pain. I knew it was broken. I could sense that, but I didn't get the pain. So nobody believed me. So anyway, long story short, I was in a sling for a long time, but people accused me of faking it. But I know my body, having lived my entire life with a chronic illness that can turn acute on a dime. I know my body. So be aware of that with your children or the other people that you live with that are on the spectrum. Don't discount what they're saying because they're not reacting the way you would expect, right? But take the time to check it out. Be curious. You might find their arms broken. So anyway, tune in next week for another free Friday tidbit. We're going to still be in sensory systems and sensory integration. Next week, we're going to be looking a little more at some of those other external sensory systems, sight, sound, and smells. And we'll also probably talk about the busyness of an environment, because that cues into not just visual, that kind of taps into many of the systems altogether. So that's what we're going to focus on next week. Don't forget to come back to this YouTube channel on Monday for another episode of Living with FASD. And then also don't forget, if this information has been made you like, I wonder, there is my book out there, which is written so that people who have been undiagnosed might begin to recognize, I wonder if this is part of my struggle in life, right? So that is sip by sip, candid conversations with people diagnosed as adults with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders or FASD. You can find it on Amazon, or get your local bookseller to order it in if you like to support your local business. So tune in on Monday for Living with FASD, and I'll see you back here next Friday for another free Friday tidbit. Have a fantastic weekend and a really good week next week. Take care.